UFC 294, Islam Makhachev versus Alexander Volkanovski 2. Welcome to another UFC prediction and analysis video presented by yours truly here at Boxing MMA Picks. He goes by Zan, I go by Harris as usual. Fight by fight breakdown and analysis from that betting perspective specifically. We want to let you know which fights are worth the value, which fights to avoid, which underdog has the best shot at winning, and some parlay action toward the end of the video as well. Please hit the thumbs up on this video. Please be sure to subscribe to the channel here at Boxing MMA Picks. And most importantly, we're going to want to hear from you in the comments when it's all said and done. For this UFC pay-per-view event 294, we have 13 fights overall. This is taking place in Abu Dhabi, and it has an early start time, 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern. So going to want to make sure you get your bets in early. We have, as usual, pay-per-view fashion, 5 fights on the main card. The other 8 fights are on the prelims. So let's start with fight number 1 of our prelims. We are looking at Sharabutdin versus Bruno Silva. Bruno Silva lost to Brendan Allen. That was back in June. He's a striker. He's dynamic, looking to land those big, powerful strikes. Swings big, misses big. Hands aren't really the cleanest, but his kicks are pretty good. Expect him to put forward pressure on his opponents. He likes to control center, almost stalk his opponents down in some ways. Does have some takedowns, although he hasn't shown it in the UFC much to this point. Just 18% on the accuracy side of things. Just 2 takedowns landed in 7 UFC fights. So not a strong point of his in the UFC. He is a BJJ black belt. Again, I've seen those takedowns outside of the UFC, but really expect him to essentially be a striker with what he's shown. Some red flags with him, durability, cardio as well. So definitely want to watch out there. For Sharabutdin Magomedov, he's a UFC newcomer. He's made a name for himself already. A high-level prospect that we're looking at here. He's undefeated at 11-0. Though he is Dagestani, he is more of a striker than he is a wrestler. Expect dynamic striking at that, a kick-heavy game. Kicks are super sharp, pretty light on his feet, good usage of distance, and I like his speed on the feet. He can definitely close the distance pretty quickly. Also good timing with what I've seen from him. Plus, you have to note the power. 10 of his 11 wins via KO, TKO. Really has all the makings of a high-level striker, so let's see how he looks in his debut. I think this should be a pretty good striking match, both ways. Silva is one of those guys who can definitely be a dangerous opponent for anyone, but you have to think that Silva is going to be outmatched here, mainly because Magomedov, I think he's the much cleaner striker. I think he's a lot faster on the feet. I think he has better movement on the feet, and I think that's going to allow him to stay out of the way of Bruno Silva's power. And again, Sharabutdin Magomedov, he has big power in his own right. And again, Bruno Silva, not really the most durable fighter with what he's shown in the UFC. A round 1 finish wouldn't surprise me here. I do think Sharabutdin Magomedov gets it done in his debut.
Yeah, for me, man, Bruno Silva hasn't been the same since that fight with Pereira. He let some lower level guys pretty much outstrike him. Brendan Allen, Gerald Mearshart. And since that Pereira fight, he definitely hasn't been the same. He can't really take the shots the same. And fighting a guy like Magomed Sharabutdin, he's going to come in with a diverse striking attack, really good kicks, good hands. He looks like he wants to keep it on the feet as well. He does have really good takedown defense. I don't see the fight going there, but he's going to be able to dictate where the fight goes. And I think in a fight like this where they both will eventually land, I think Mohammad is going to land the more shots, and I think he's the more durable guy in the cage here. So I like Mohammad a lot in this spot. I think he gets it done in his debut.
Fight number 2 of our prelims, Victoria Dudakova versus Jinh Frey. Dudakova, she beat Estela Nunes in her July debut, just 24 years old. Expect forward pressure from her. Her striking's pretty decent, though it's not her strength. Her movement, her activity, her combinations, they're not bad at all. She can definitely be effective with that striking, although, again, not her strong suit. She does want to work her way into the clinch. She does want to use her wrestling. It is her primary mode of offense. Expect multiple takedown attempts, I should say. throughout the fight. Good top control as well. We see her record there at 7-0. 4 of those 7 wins via submission. So the ground game is where she wants it, and that is her strength. Jinh Frey lost to Elise Reed back in June. We're looking at 3 losses in a row now for Jinh Frey. Decent skill set on paper. She is a decent striker. The jabs are there, the calf kicks are there, pretty technical with her striking. She can play the clinch game against the cage. She has shown some takedown ability as well with some top control. Three takedowns landed in her last fight, for example. Good takedown defense as well, which is going to be a key factor in this fight. 88%. She's given up just 3 takedowns in her last, or in 7 UFC fights overall, I should say. Decent poise, decent control. She can fight from the center of the octagon. She's composed. Just not really the highest level of fighter, and a fighter who is going to be past her prime at 38 years old. It is an interesting fight in some ways. Again, Dudakova, primarily a ground game fighter against Jinh Frey's near 90% takedown defense. So that may eliminate a lot of what Dudakova wants to do in this fight. But again, I'm not looking at Jinh Frey as a high-level fighter here. Her striking, I don't think, is active enough to give Dudakova problems. And although her takedown defense is good, I can see Dudakova landing more than 1 takedown in this fight, winning this fight using her groundwork. Dudakova is, of course, just based on the age, she's more likely to be that fighter making improvements to her game. Jinh Frey is more likely to be that fighter on the decline. And I think the UFC knows what they're doing with this matchup, right? It's in Abu Dhabi. Of course, the Russians are going to get advantages in those types of spots. So my pick is going to be Victoria Dudakova. I think it's a very winnable spot for her, and she's a huge favorite, so Vegas definitely agrees.
Yeah, this is definitely a fight where they want Dudakova to win the fight. She's fighting a girl who's old in Jinh Frey, who's pretty much decent everywhere. But she's gonna be fighting Jinh Frey's gonna be fighting Dudakova, who's a grappling specialist, and her grappling is impressive. She gets on top. She has good back control as well if she needs it. Good top control, good ground and pound, and she can do this in the 3rd round, which is super impressive against a fighter like Jinh Frey, who is known to slow down as the fight goes on, right? So I think Dudakova is going to get the grappling going here. I think she wins this fight. I think UFC is setting her up here, and I think she wins a decision here, maybe a finish. But I got Dudakova here winning the fight here.
3rd fight of the prelims, Nathaniel Wood versus Mohammad Naimov. For Nathaniel Wood, he's on a 3-fight winning streak, beating Andre Fili back in July. He's a good overall fighter. He's been showing that he's a really high-level fighter during this winning streak that he's on. Good on the feet, fundamentally, good movement, clean hands, good combinations, good timing as well. He has a quick jab. He has good striking IQ in general. He can work the cage as well. He can use the clinch. He can land takedowns. We see the takedown numbers there at 1.7 per fight, 54% on the accuracy side. That's telling you that he's getting it when he chooses to go for it, and has very knowledgeable top control to go along with it. So again, really just a really well-rounded fighter overall. Going up against Mohammad Naimov, who beat Jamie Malarkey in his June debut. He has competent stand-up from what I've seen. Look for those calf kicks. Look for him to be explosive. Look for him to stick that jab out and move pretty well. Looking for that timing. Didn't really land or didn't land any takedowns in his debut, I should say. He was also taken down 3 times. Only 50% takedown defense to go along with it. So those numbers are not great, of course, those are concerning numbers in this fight where Nathaniel Wood can land takedowns. I have seen him land takedowns. I have seen solid top control from him outside the UFC. But that could be, again, a factor in this fight to pay attention to. I think this is going to be one of those fights where Nathaniel Wood is just simply the much more skilled fighter across the board. But don't get it twisted. Mohammad Naimov, very dangerous, very capable as an underdog. That said, I don't see where Naimov would actually have a tactical advantage in this fight. I look at Nathaniel Wood as the more capable striker. I look at Nathaniel Wood as potentially even having the better wrestling. As long as Nathaniel Wood stays out of that early fight danger with how explosive Mohammad Naimov is, I think he'll be okay. So Nathaniel Wood is going to be my pick to get it done here.
I actually think Nathaniel Wood is better everywhere. But a big thing in this fight is going to be the size difference. Nathaniel Wood in this weight class has been undersized in every fight. His skills have paid the bills, and he's been able to get by those fights and win those fights. I think he's 3-0 in this division. In this fight, he's going to be fighting a much bigger guy that's going to have a size advantage, and I think Nathaniel Wood is going to style on him. I think he's going to have the skills to do good in this fight, but I think he just takes one shot from Naimov. When you look at as good as Nathaniel Wood has been, his chin has been something that is not the greatest. And against a guy like Naimov, he can definitely get caught. So I wouldn't be surprised if he gets caught. I think this could be a parlay buster. I do think Nathaniel Wood is the better fighter. His striking, his leg kicks, his wrestling, I think he can implement all those things. I think he can dictate where the fight goes. I'm going to go with Nathaniel Wood because I have to go with the skills. They pay the bills, and I think he's the better guy. And if you're on the Naimov side, you're kind of banking on that heavy shot landing. So I got to go with the guy I think is going to be winning the fight until something like that would happen, if it happens. If it doesn't happen, I see Nathaniel Wood winning every round, outstriking him. The leg kicks will add up. So I got to go with Nathaniel Wood just being the better guy. The size is a problem. The power on the Naimov side is a problem. Nathaniel Wood's chin is a problem, but he's better everywhere else. So I got to go with Nathaniel Wood here to get this win here.
Fourth fight of our prelims, Mike Breeden versus Anshul Jubli. Mike Breeden lost to Terrence McKinney in August. 8 of his 10 wins via KO TKO. He is introduced as a striker, so you know what to look out for him, know what to look out for in him. His stand-up is solid. He is primarily hands, patient, almost too patient at times. I think he can benefit from higher output. That said, he picks his shots well. And I've seen him, close distance effectively, get in with the clinch, get in and land takedowns as well. Takedown defense isn't great, but that's definitely something to watch out for in this one, where Anshul Jubli can potentially capitalize on that. Jubli beat Jeka Saragi back in February. He's decent on the feet, good height, the movement is okay. The jab hand stays active, decent long jab, decent long right hand. Has decent combinations as well. Look for him to try to be that fighter coming forward with a consistent pace, with consistent cardio to go along with that. As for the ground game, he landed 2 takedowns in his debut. So that tells you that, he's going to go for it. He does have knowledgeable top control to go along with that. I have seen him set up submissions. The grappling knowledge is there for sure with what I've seen from him. Looks like this card overall, as we go through it fight by fight, just looks like it's full of a lot of intentionally favorable matchups for the bigger favorites. I think this is another one of those fights that, heavily favors Anshul Jubli tactically, stylistically. Breeden is a solid striker, but again, not really an aggressive striker. He doesn't really strike at a high pace. I think that's going to allow for Jubli to successfully be the aggressor that he tries to be. Breeden doesn't have the best takedown defense, and that should allow for Jubli to be able to use takedowns when needed if things do get sticky on the feet. And although Jubli still has a lot to prove, he didn't take on a UFC level fighter in his debut, so still has a lot to prove. Even though Jubli still has to prove himself, Breeden has kind of proven that he's not UFC level, right? OFC in the 0-3 in the UFC so far. So I see a very winnable fight for Anshul Jubli. I'd probably advise against betting for this because Jubli is still unproven. But as I break it down analytically, Anshul Jubli just has to be the pick here. So he's going to be my pick to get it done.
Yeah, with Breeden, he's one of those guys you can't really trust, right? He's getting knocked out in the first round against good guys, but Even in his fight versus Natan Levy, he didn't show up as well. So at this level, he's definitely struggled in the UFC. In this fight, he's gonna be fighting a fighter from India, Anshul Jubli. UFC definitely wants to take over that market. There's a lot of money there to be made, so they definitely wanted to set him up with a guy that they think he's gonna beat. Let's be real, right? So this is a business, and they don't have any Indian fighters currently on the roster. They put him on the Abu Dhabi card. I think this is a fight he's going to win. He should win with his grappling, his cardio. Cardio is going to be big in this fight. He can go the 3 rounds, and I think his grappling is going to be I think he's going to go to that. And if I see Breeden is able to be taken down, Jubli has good top control, can do this for 3 rounds. But I see him getting a finish at some point, somehow. Ground and pound, submission, but definitely as a result of that grappling advantage I see here. So I'm going to go with Jubli. I'm not confident only because, again, he's not tested in the UFC, but just based on the visuals, based on what's on paper, I think this is a fight he definitely should win. I think the UFC is setting him up here to get a win.
All right, fight number 5 of our prelims. Let's talk Abu Azaitar versus Sedriques Dumas. For Azaitar lost to Marc-Andre Barriault. That was way back in March 2021. This is just a very inactive fighter in general. This is just going to be his 3rd fight over a 5+ year span. Plus, he's 37 years old at that. Stylistically, somewhat wild on feet, likes to brawl, likes to engage, likes to make it look messy. He is a decent striker, though, a former K1 champion, so he does have accolades to his name. Constant pace, constant movement. He's going to force that forward pressure. Really a fighter who's just all action, right? Going up against Sedriques Dumas, unanimous decision win over Cody Brundage back in June. Solid, patient striking, very composed, yet still has good power. Half of his wins via KO TKO. Active switch stance. I like his kicks specifically, especially as the taller, longer fighter here. Going to be a good weapon of his. Solid, active jab as well, especially that he fights from range, right? He's going to have a 3 inches in reach, another, 5 inches in height. So definitely going to use those advantages to his advantage. And he has a good ground game, good top control, good at holding position. The grappling is good. Even in defensive guard situations, I've seen him use his grappling IQ to reverse position or to work his way back up. Probably won't matter in this fight. Whereas we saw somebody like Cody Brundage play into Sedriques Dumas' strengths, playing the ground game. I don't see Abu Azaitar doing the same thing, right? So that makes this fight really unpredictable on either side. Azaitar is going to fight at a pressure and a pace that we don't know whether or not Dumas can handle, right? So that's going to be a big test for Dumas at this level. Dumas is, of course, the younger fighter, the more active fighter, the fighter with the better ground game, which is meaningful for this fight. Unfortunately for Dumas, just not a strong takedown artist, right? So he's going to have to rely on maybe Azaitar's pressure as an example to find those opportunities to bring this fight to the mat, work the clinch, drag it to the mat, for example. So again, a fight that's a little tricky from a prediction perspective. That's going to tell you that Azaitar has value as an underdog here. But ultimately, I'm going to side with Sedriques Dumas because Azaitar just too inactive for me. It may have been okay when he was 35, may have been okay when he was 33, but he's 37 now. So when you go 2+ years and you come back at 37, that inactivity is more likely to be more meaningful, in a negative manner coming into this fight if you're on the betting side of Abu Azaitar. So I think Azaitar really only has a puncher's chance in this one. And although it is possible that puncher's chance is successful, I think that otherwise Dumas is going to find ways to win as the more complete MMA fighter, as the more active MMA fighter, maybe just kind of win that war of attrition as well. So I'm going with Sedriques Dumas, but I will say this is not a confident pick by any means, especially when I consider how big of a favorite Dumas is. But nonetheless, I think Dumas gets it done.
Yeah, Dumas at 2-1 favorite is pretty wild. But Azaitar, he hasn't really evolved. He's pretty much the same guy. He's actually digressing at this point. His brother as well looked bad in his last fight. But Azaitar, he's not getting better. And as the fight goes on here, if Dumas is still in it, if he doesn't get knocked out, he's gonna have that cardio advantage, which I think, even though Dumas showed bad cardio in his loss in the UFC, I just think that Azaitar's cardio is worse, and I think it really does slow down in the later half of that first round. He definitely looks different. He could definitely come out here, knock him out in the first round for sure. But I think if he doesn't get that done, I think Dumas, well-rounded guy. He's gonna be the tallest striker as well, so he should be able to utilize that reach. Plus, he has an underrated grappling game as well that I think he can utilize in this fight as the fight goes on when Azaitar slows down. So I'm gonna go with Dumas here. I don't like the odds. Most likely, I'm not putting any bets on this fight. But I think at this point here, I'm not sure Azaitar is taking fighting serious. He's not active. And the last we've seen from him, he has a lot of holes that he hasn't improved on. And I think Dumas can kind of exploit them. So I'm going to go Dumas here to get the win.
Fight number 6 of our prelims, Javid Basharat versus Victor Henry. Good bantamweight fight here. Javid Basharat beat Mateus Mendonca. That was back in January, 3-0 in the UFC now, 14-0, still undefeated. 11 of those 14 wins via finish. Switch stance fighter, very well-rounded, clean, fluid stand-up, striking diversity is there. The good calf kicks are there as well. Good in and out movement. He has a Taekwondo background, so that's going to speak to his footwork and his movement, like I mentioned. Good timing, good striking IQ overall. Really elusive, especially in the pocket. Look out for that from him, as I envision a lot of striking exchanges in this fight. Also really good at putting a consistent pressure and pace on his opponents. We look at the takedown numbers there, 2 takedowns per fight, 85% takedown defense, nearly 60% on the takedown accuracy side of things. So that speaks to how well-versed he is. He has good top control when he lands those takedowns, active ground and pound, good at positional improvements. He can find those submissions as well. Definitely a prospect that is worth watching. And we see him as a huge favorite here against a very capable fighter in Victor Henry, who had a split decision win over Tony Gravely back in March. Victor Henry has pretty good, clean stand-up overall. Good calculated movement. He sets up his offense pretty well. Regular jab usage, a lot of fakes and feints, good timing as a counter puncher, just not really rushing at any point throughout the fight. The solid striking IQ is there, a good diverse range of attacks as well. So the offense is good, right? Don't really expect him to land takedowns, but his grappling is decent. 79% takedown defense as well, which allows him to keep the fights on the feet. In the UFC, it's been that sort of in the pocket, good striking technique, point fighting style that has worked well for him. And again, he's pretty good at it. But unfortunately for Victor Henry, I think this is just a really bad matchup for him. I'll keep it really short because, again, Javid Basharat is the big favorite here. And I can understand why. Victor Henry, I think, is really talented, but I think Javid Basharat should be better everywhere. Most notably, he should have a better ground game. Even going up against Victor Henry's 79% takedown defense, should still be able to land a takedown if things get sticky on the feet. But I don't anticipate them getting sticky on the feet. I think Victor Henry can be competitive, but I like Basharat pretty comfortably here. I think with the striking, like I said, Basharat's really good in the pocket, really elusive in the pocket. I think he gets the better of those striking exchanges. I think he's able to land a takedown. We saw somebody like Tony Gravely, for example, look good mixing the striking with the ground game. Basharat will be a higher, will have the ability to execute that type of style at a higher level, right? So I like Javid Basharat to get it done. With how good Victor Henry can be, the odds might be a little steep, but looking at the matchup itself, I don't see how Victor Henry wins this fight. So I like Javid Basharat pretty comfortably here.
Yeah, this is one of those fights, man. This is definitely a lock type of situation. Basharat's gonna run through Victor Henry better everywhere. I think he's gonna utilize that grappling in this fight. Even on the feet, he's gonna be a problem, Basharat. But on the ground, I can see him getting a submission at some point. These Basharat brothers are for real. This is the better Basharat brother. This guy is definitely better than his younger brother in the same division. I think it's gonna be one-way traffic. I like Javid Basharat here to. I think this is a lock type of situation.
Let's move on to fight number 7. In that case, we have Muhammad Yahya versus Trevor Peek. Muhammad Yahya, UFC newcomer, 5-fight winning streak, UAE Warriors lightweight champion is where he's coming from. Patient movement and striking from the outside. He's going to fight from distance. He picks his shots pretty well. Look for a lot of fakes and feints from him, trying to get you to bite, right? Trying to find that timing. And he can be dangerous. 7 of his 12 wins via KO TKO. Pretty sharp with what I've seen. And the durability is there from what I've seen. Toughness is there as well. He starts to pick up pressure as the fight goes on. Otherwise, you're looking at a fighter who's just steady, right? Nothing really jumps out at you about his game, but looks like he's a competent fighter who can be effective with kind of like a basic style in a good way. Trevor Peek, on the other hand, unanimous decision loss to Chepe Mariscal back in June. All 8 of his wins via KO TKO. Almost all of them have been first round finishes. We know that Trevor Peek can be very explosive with good power, high pressure, high pace, basically throwing as hard as he can with every shot, but he has no real technique behind it. He can land the takedowns. He can be taken down. And he's just really one of those fighters who's dangerous for as long as he's in it. Even if he's gassed out, yes, he will slow down, but yes, he will become a bit sloppier, but he can still throw power. He can still be dangerous. He can still catch you if you're not keeping those hands up defensively. Vegas at one point had this as pretty much a pick 'em. Looks like money's going in on Trevor Peek. I don't really know about that though, right? I think this fight is a coin flip. I think it's very unpredictable. Peek is dangerous. Yes, I have seen Muhammad Yahya dropped before, and Muhammad Yahya doesn't really have a style that's gonna force power or aggressiveness on you. That means that Trevor Peek can come out firing, can come out and catch Yahya, and can end it early in typical Trevor Peek style. Yahya is definitely the sturdier fighter with the more consistent striking, and I can see him pointing his way to a decision, avoiding Trevor Peek's power for the most part, especially in that early part of the fight, with the lack of technique that Trevor Peek has. I'm going to be on the side of consistency here. I think a Peek KO would not surprise me at all, right? A round 1 Trevor Peek KO, that would not surprise me. I think that could be likely. But like we saw in Trevor Peek's last fight, that power or that style, that sloppy style is not always going to work against someone who has better striking than you, against someone who is competent on the feet and can see, the way that Trevor Peek throws without technique. Someone who has a little bit of striking is going to be able to see it coming and is going to be able to brace themselves and not really let that impact them. So I like Yahya here as the better striker, as the more consistent striker, as a striker that's going to be able to stay out of danger. And from there, I cannot trust Trevor Peek enough to actually win a fight where he doesn't knock out his opponent. So I'm going Muhammad Yahya, the underdog. I think he gets it done.
Thing about Trevor Peek's style is even if he's a favorite, you can't really trust him because he's going out there playing rock 'em, sock 'em, right? He's just going out there standing in front of these guys, and he's taking one, he's giving one. So his striking style is definitely, or his fighting style is definitely a risky thing, especially when he's a favorite. When he's an underdog, his style is definitely that dog style that you want to roll with in an underdog spot where it's like 3-1. But when he's a favorite on a card where there's not that many underdog spots, I gotta go with the underdog here. Yeah, I gotta go with the underdog. He's fighting at home. They're fighting in Abu Dhabi. This guy is from Abu Dhabi, so he's fighting at home. He's going to be technically the better striker. The concern, obviously, he has been dropped. He has been finished by strikes, and Peak throws hammers, and that's the concern. But if he's not able to finish this guy, Peak is a bit predictable as the fight goes on, and I think Muhammad is the type of striker that can kind of pick up on his tendencies, and he has power. I think he can land something devastating. But again, this is a fight that can go either way. He could win this fight. His reckless style. Whenever you're in a Peak fight, the fight literally can go either way because the way Peak fights, he's given all offense, but at the same time, it's kind of a killer be killed type of style that, yeah, he might knock you out or he's going to lose the fight or he might get knocked out. He does have a good chin. He hasn't been finished. I'm going to go with Mohammad as well. I'm going to take him here as in the underdog spot at home. I think the UFC, they see something here. Even though Peak is the favorite, Peak has all that power. The UFC is, I think there's a chance Muhammad gets it done. But again, I'm only picking this because this card has not many underdog spots, and this is a spot that I think the underdog has a fighting chance. So I'm going to go with him. But ultimately, I do think Peak wins the fight. But I think there is that value as the underdog taking Muhammad here in this spot.
Final fight of our prelims. Let's talk Tim Elliott versus Muhammad Mokaev. Tim Elliott, 2-fight winning streak after beating Victor Altamirano in June. We know he has that super awkward, unorthodox style of stand-up. A lot of movement, a lot of fakes, a lot of level changes. Going to keep that pressure on you, even if you're hitting him. Going to use that pressure to actively look for takedown attempts. We see the takedown numbers, they're really good at almost 4 per fight, almost 50% on the accuracy side of things. And he's really relentless on top when he lands those takedowns. If you work your way back up, he's really good with the chain wrestling as well. And the grappling is there to close out the skill set on the ground. He's going to be one of those fighters who's tough, who's relentless, great cardio as well. You see the record there at 20-12, which of course you don't love if you're ever on the betting side of that style of fighter. But he's going to be one of those fighters who's a tough matchup for anyone. You're going to have to be sharp when going up against Tim Elliott. And Muhammad Mokaev, on the other hand, beat Jafel Filo back in March, still undefeated at 10-0. We know that he's a good striker from what we've seen. Good footwork, good quick in and out movement, solid counterpuncher as well. He can apply pressure and pace on his opponents, and he can use that pressure to lean into his wrestling ability. He's a great wrestler. We see his takedown numbers even more impressive than Tim Elliott's. Takedown defense is good to go along with that. High level grappler to go along with that. The ground and pound is there. The positional improvements are there. The technique is looking cleaner on a fight-by-fight basis. Still a very young fighter at just 23 years old. And we know that he has the highest level of toughness with what we saw in his last fight. Took some heavy shots 2 fights ago, fought his way through it, got caught in a nasty knee bar in his last fight that would have made anyone tap, fought his way through that, and eventually finished his opponent. So we're looking at one of those fighters who's going to leave it all on the table, who's a young prospect, and who has fought through some adversity at this point to remain undefeated. I think it's a great matchup to be the feature prelim. I'll start by saying this. I do feel comfortable picking Muhammad Mokaev to win the fight. I don't fully feel comfortable with betting it at these odds. I think both guys have similar skill sets on paper, similar tendencies as well. Tim Elliott is going to be a guy who plays up to his level of competition, and all the pressure we know is going to be on Muhammad Mokaev with none of the pressure on Tim Elliott. So that could spell disaster if you're assuming that this is an easy parlay piece, right? That said, I do think that Muhammad Mokaev should technically be better or at least more effective everywhere in this fight. Elliott has great tools, but Elliott's striking is not as good. Elliott's wrestling may not be as good. Elliott's grappling may not be as good. So yeah, Mohammad Mokaev definitely going to be my pick here. I feel very comfortable saying that, but I would be careful assuming that this is an easy parlay piece. But yeah, nonetheless, my pick comfortably Mohammad Mokaev.
Yeah, I think this is a very easy parlay piece. I'm not, Harris, this guy is going to run through this guy. Elliott's only way to win this fight is if he can latch up some type of choke, some type of guillotine in a takedown attempt. But I think Makhachev going to be very strategic with the type of takedowns he's going to employ in this fight. Makhachev can do that wrestling stuff for 3 rounds. He's going to win this with positional control. He might get a finish at some point. I like Mokaev here. Another strong spot for me on this card.
All right, let's move on to our main cards. At that point, we have 5 fights overall for the pay-per-view event. Let's start with fight number 1 of the main card, Said Nurmagomedov versus Muin Gafurov. Nurmagomedov lost to Jonathan Martinez back in March. We spoke about that last card or 2 cards ago whenever Jonathan Martinez fought. Good lateral movement, good striking, high level diverse striker, good calf kick, good high kick, good spin kick. One of those fighters that has good combinations and is a sneaky counterpuncher. Being a Dagestani fighter, he's also very confident in his wrestling ability, in his takedown defense, although he fights a lot more on the feet rather than being a wrestler. With that confidence also comes a strong grappling ability as well. Really just looking at a high level fighter overall. Muin Gafurov, on the other hand, lost his June debut to John Castaneda. He's introduced as a combat sambo style of fighter, 2-time combat sambo world champion. Striking wise, he is solid. He is explosive. He can be dynamic. He has decent power. 10 of his 18 wins via KO, TKO, and he's going to force his way in, right? He's going to close distance. He's going to use his combinations, uses big punches to try to close the distance. He will attempt takedowns as well. He will show his top control. The ground and pound is active enough to score points, but his approach on the mat is, keeping you down with as much ground control as possible. Gafurov, decent style, right? But unfortunately, I don't think it's a style that can keep up, right? We saw someone like John Castaneda adapt to his style, and Castaneda used his more dynamic movement to win a unanimous decision. Castaneda, yes, he also used 3 takedowns, which I don't anticipate Nurmagomedov being as willing to do. But there's key lessons to be learned, and that lesson to me is that Gafurov isn't necessarily a high-level fighter here. So someone like Said Nurmagomedov, on the other hand, from Cody Stamann to Douglas Silva de Andrade to Said Kakramanov to Jonathan Martinez, now we're looking at Muin Gafurov. This is definitely a step down in competition for him, and a fight that he should be able to win as the more dynamic striker with better movement. Gafurov showed that he can land takedowns in his Dana White Contender Series loss to Chad Anheliger, but he wasn't able to land any in his debut, and that tells me that Said Nurmagomedov should be able to keep it on the feet. With that, he should be able to run away with this fight. So I feel pretty comfortable picking Said Nurmagomedov to get it done here, and I like the odds as well.
Yeah, this is one of those fights where Nurmagomedov is better everywhere, right? And he's gonna be able to dictate where the fight goes on the feet. I think Nurmagomedov can style. All right, he lost that fight against Jonathan Martinez, but a lot of people thought he won that fight. And Jonathan Martinez is a legit striker if it comes down to just striking. So Nurmagomedov is at a different level than this guy. I see Nurmagomedov winning the fight, winning a decision type of fight, maybe even get a finish in this fight. So I'm going to go Nurmagomedov here for the win.
All right, let's move on to our second fight of the main card, Ikram Aliskerov versus Warlley Alves. Good middleweight scrap here. Aliskerov beat Phil Hawes in his May debut. Canceled fights since versus Paulo Costa versus Nasruddin Imavov. So that lets you know what the UFC thinks of him. Good, patient, forward pressure, clean, powerful striking. He fights at distance. He uses his jab effectively. Not an amazing striker, by any means, but he more than holds his own. Pretty effective as well from what I've seen. Good wrestling too. You don't really see a ton of chain wrestling from him, but you do see a good amount of takedown attempts with good timing. He's good at mixing it in with his striking, and the top control is good. He can find submissions, everything that you'd expect from being a Dagestani fighter in that respect. Warlley Alves, on the other hand, split decision loss to Nicholas Dalby back in January. That's 2 losses in a row for Warlley Alves now. He has 15 wins, 5 of them via KO, TKO, 7 of them via submission. So that lets you know in some ways the type of fighter he is. He's a finisher. He can be explosive, especially early in his fights. 3-time Brazilian kickboxing champion, pretty decorated fighter, pretty complete fighter as well. He has nasty leg kicks. He can land takedowns. He can grapple. He's a tough opponent for a lot of fighters. But if there is one key downside to Warlley Alves is that he loses a lot of steam after that first round, and you can really start to take the fight to him after that. We saw what happened in his last fight with Nicholas Dalby edging his way to a victory. So that speaks a lot to how much he fades in his fights. It's understandable to see why Aliskerov is the favorite here, but like with any Warlley Alves fight, got to be careful assuming that the favorite has this one locked for sure. Alves will be dangerous, but Aliskerov has a bit of a cautious style, right? He stays out of range, and that should allow him to avoid the danger, or at least avoid the early danger, where where Alves has that best chance of finishing you. And from there, I think Aliskerov should start to cruise to victory after that first round, where, like I mentioned, Alves is just not as dangerous because he has lost a lot of steam at that point. I do believe that most of this fight stays standing, and for as good as Alves is, we saw a striker who's not that good. Nicholas Dalby is not that good of a striker, and we saw him significantly outstrike and outwork Warlley Alves. So that tells me not really to be concerned with the ability that Alves does have, and that tells me that Ikram Aliskerov should be able to get this done pretty easily.
Yeah, this Aliskerov guy, man, he's good, but he's not that guy, in my opinion. I think he can get caught in this fight. I think Warlley Alves does have the power to catch him. Warlley Alves is one of those Brazilians that wants to strike, that wants to stand up, doesn't really want to take it to the mat. He does have some grappling, but he doesn't want to take it there. In this fight, Aliskerov would have the wrestling advantage on the feet. It's close. I like Aliskerov overall in a 3-round fight. I think as he figures out his timing, he's gonna be able to kind of catch Warlley Alves, and Warlley Alves can get finished and he can get hurt, and he doesn't have the best striking defense as well. So it's a fight that I think Aliskerov should win. He's really good everywhere: wrestling, grappling, striking, good boxing. I think he's better than Alves everywhere. It's one of those fights where he is the better guy. It's just I'm not sure because he hasn't really fought at this level. He has been knocked out by Khamzat Chimaev. So Warlley Alves can definitely knock him out here in this fight. He does have that type of power, that type of striking ability as well. So I'm going to go with the favorite, Aliskerov, to win the fight, but those odds are crazy because I think that he isn't proven, especially against a guy like Alves that can land that heavy shot. If he lands that shot, he can put his lights out, right? So minus 600 is pretty crazy to me, but I'm going to go with Aliskerov to get the win in this fight.
Fight number 3 of our main card, Magomed Ankalaev versus Johnny Walker. Definitely a high stakes light heavyweight fight here. Ankalaev, we know, had that split decision draw versus Jan Blachowicz back in December. For what it's worth, nearly everyone had Ankalaev winning that fight. That was for the vacant light heavyweight title. So again, high stakes lightweight fight that we're looking at here. Bit of a combat sambo style, but much more on the striking side of things. High level striking, good movement, good IQ. He has good constant pressure. He has a good jab. good counter punching, good timing. Combinations are high level, really just high level boxing for the UFC in general, and just really good striking speed to go along with that. Half of his wins are via KO, TKO, so we absolutely got to respect the power. One takedown per fight as well. He does have a good ground game when he chooses to do so. Good takedown defense to go along with that, so he is able to keep fights standing if he doesn't want to go to the ground. Johnny Walker's on a 3-fight winning streak, and he's been looking good. He beat Anthony Smith back in May. We know, sort of the typical script with Johnny Walker. He's a big threat early in the fight, very explosive, a lot of power. 16 of his 21 wins via KO, TKO. 11 of those 16 are in round one. Only 2 of his 7 losses via decision. So in some ways, he is a finish or be finished type of fighter. Explosive, like I mentioned, but his striking style is a lot more kicks in comparison to the punches. And one thing to know with Johnny Walker, for as dangerous as his striking could be, his striking technically is not that great. He has cleaned up his striking a lot. He does use a lot more fakes and feints in his attack, does make a lot better decisions in his attack. His technique is somewhat better. He's more methodical. He is a lot more patient. But this is a fighter where cardio and chin have been two question marks of his, but improvements again that he has made, that has made him more durable. And like I said, that where he has been looking pretty good in this winning streak that he's on. Johnny Walker, again, he's looked a lot more improved, showing that he belongs in the upper echelon of the light heavyweight division. Unfortunately for Johnny Walker, I think he's going up against a fighter in Magomedov Ankalaev, who I still believe is the best light heavyweight in the division, right? Ankalaev should be better everywhere in this fight. He should be the much better striker. He should be a lot more complete, especially with the striking. But then Ankalaev should also be the better wrestler, right? Walker doesn't even really look for takedowns. Neither does Ankalaev. But like we saw in the Blachowicz fight, when he needs to resort to it, he is the better wrestler. He's more likely to be able to land takedowns in this situation, especially going up against Johnny Walker, who only has 60% takedown defense. I don't think Walker's going to have the answers for Ankalaev throughout this fight. I think Ankalaev is as tough as they come, so I don't think that a fight-changing punch or kick on the side of Johnny Walker is likely to actually happen. And like I said, I think Ankalaev should be good in this spot because I think he's technically better everywhere. So I'm going Magomed Ankalaev to get it done.
Yeah, that was a great breakdown, man. Harris, good job. With like aside from the height advantage on the Walker side, the athleticism, the jumping ability, Ankalaev is better everywhere else. And in this fight, I think one thing I said up to myself was Johnny Walker. If he fights any top 5 guys, I don't think his chin's going to hold up against those type of guys at that point. I think eventually they're going to connect. His chin is not UFC level. He can get by the guys he's been getting by, but Ankalaev is a different guy. And I think Ankalaev, he's going to be pissed off from his last fight. He should be the champion. And I think he's going to come out here, man. And I think he's going to hurt this guy. I think this is another good spot here for a parlay piece. I think aside from some crazy highlight knockout of the year contender type of action from Johnny Walker, I think Ankalaev is going to win. I think he's going to outbox him. So I got to go with Ankalaev here to put his hands on Walker. I think he gets the win.
Co-main event of the evening, fight number 4 on this UFC 294 pay-per-view main card. We have Kamaru Usman versus Khamzat Chimaev taking place at middleweight. Usman majority decision loss to Leon Edwards. That was in their trilogy fight back in March. Even as he gets up there in age at 36 years old, the striking is still improving on a fight-by-fight basis. We know he's patient, he's methodical, he's technical, he's efficient. He has a good jab, especially with his long arms. He's steady, he's consistent. the tools and the traits that you need to have when you've been a champion for so long, when you've been in championship settings for so long. We know his MO is his world-class wrestling, almost 3 takedowns per fight, 97% takedown defense. I think the best in UFC history, if I'm not mistaken. And we know that takedown defense is definitely going to be tested in this fight going up against Khamzat Chimaev, who fought just over a year ago. It's been a little while when he beat Kevin Holland. He's 6-0 in the UFC now, still undefeated overall at 12-0, very capable on the feet. He has good technique, he has good stalking movement, he has good power. We know he's going to go at an overwhelming pace, especially early in the fight. We saw what happened in that Kevin Holland fight, got really scrappy within a few seconds. Has excellent takedowns, good entries, good body lock, good chain wrestling, smothering wrestling to go along with that in general. Excellent top control, ground and pound is there, physically strong, which I think is going to be the most apparent thing for this fight. And, seemingly has an unlimited cardio tank to some degree. He did prove his resilience as well, prove his toughness as well when we think about that fight against Gilbert Burns. So this is someone who sort of needed that experience to be a little bit battle tested for these higher level type of fights. Now, like our main event, the storyline here is that Kamaru Usman is stepping in on short notice, moving up a weight class as well to take on the bigger Chimaev. But Usman, he says this is the fight that he's been ready for. He says that this is the fight that he's wanted. A fight that couldn't happen because Chimaev couldn't make 170. So here it is taking place at middleweight. I think the respective skill sets makes this a very interesting fight, at least on paper. On one hand, you think that Chimaev runs through Usman, especially on short notice for Usman, especially up a weight class for Usman. On the other hand, you think that Usman has key tools to be more than competitive in this fight, especially that great takedown defense, especially with the wrestling prowess that he has of his own. We also saw what happened when Chimaev stepped up in competition just in general. Very tough out against Gilbert Burns despite securing a win there. So again, this one's really interesting, really unpredictable in a lot of ways. Despite the age, despite the 2 losses to Leon Edwards, I do like the value of Kamaru Usman here, if nothing else. Undoubtedly the best competition that Chimaev has faced to date. And we saw how much of a sweat it was for Chimaev when he last took on an elite fighter in Gilbert Burns. That said, from a prediction perspective, you got to roll with Khamzat. He's the bigger guy, he's a stronger guy. I think his skill set won't allow for Usman to try to implement his respective strengths, whereas Gilbert Burns was an extremely dangerous grappler, and that's why Chimaev didn't really want to take the risks there. Usman doesn't really have that same grappling prowess specifically, so that should allow Khamzat to say, hey, let's fight fire with fire. Let's have a wrestling match. So I expect a lot of wrestling. I expect the younger, stronger fighter who's just as advanced from a wrestling perspective to prevail in this one. Again, the short notice, I think, is too much of an X factor. We saw what happened with Usman and Gaethje doing the media training, even though Usman shut those rumors down in terms of something happening with the knee. But Chimaev should just be the fresher, younger, stronger fighter here, who's had a longer training camp, who's willing to fight fire with fire, and who should get it done. So I'm going to go Khamzat Chimaev to get it done.
Yeah, for me, on paper, I think Usman should win. On paper, I think he's going to be the more dangerous, like the striker throwing the heavier shots. I think he's better defensively. I think he has the cardio advantage, the wrestling chops to do enough to make it hard for Khamzat and kind of tire him out as the fight goes on. So definitely, I think on paper, I gotta go with Usman, but Usman's body is getting older, and he has noted knee problems, and in a fight against Khamzat, knee problems is not going to help you out here in this fight. He's coming in short notice. These type of factors, I think, lean the fight for me to Chimaev. He has that wrestling, but again, his cardio kind of gassed out in that Burns fight. In the Burns fight, he didn't want to really take it to the mat. He respected Burns' abilities in the grappling. He's not going to really respect Usman's submission ability. So I think he's going to utilize that grappling, get this to the mat, and younger guy, bigger guy. There's a Kamzat hype as well. I got to go with Chimaev in this spot here to get the win. I just can't trust the body of Kamaru Usman against the Wolf. So I'm going to go Kamzat to get the win.
All right, and let's talk main event of the evening. We have Islam Makhachev versus Alexander Volkanovski, the rematch. This is in Islam's division. So again, for the lightweight title. For Islam, his last fight was beating Alexander Volkanovski, their first time up back in February. We know his MO, combat sambo style, pretty decent boxer, good jab, good level changes, good fakes and feints. His stand-up is patient. Don't underestimate his power either. He sets up the takedowns really well, and to that combat sambo script, once he gets you down, he's going to dominate you in a lot of ways. Great top control, good ground and pound, always improving position, good submission attempts, everything that you'd expect. He's a complete package defensively as well. Really good takedown defense, really good submission defense. Alexander Volkanovski beat Yair Rodriguez back in July. Going to see a lot of fakes and feints from him on the feet, especially early in that fight, trying to find his reads, trying to find the timing. Good active leg kicks, good counter puncher, great timing as well. High IQ combinations. We know everything is controlled, everything is high level in terms of his technique. He can land takedowns as well, 1.8 takedowns per 15 minutes, just 69% from a takedown defense side of things after being taken down 4 times by Islam Makhachev in their first fight. But he knows how to transition and scramble and work his way back up and sort of minimize the damage. And he's physically strong, which proves to be a factor in his fights. So he may get taken down, but fighters are not really doing a lot with it. I'm going to be kind of direct on this one. I don't really like Volkanovski at all in this spot because it's sort of a no obligation, no expectations situation for him. We know he's filling in for Charles Oliveira here on 10 days notice. It's Makhachev's weight class. It's in Dubai, which is the biggest thing. And we saw Volkanovski say, oh, hey, if the roles were reversed, Islam wouldn't be taking this. Yeah, he probably wouldn't, right? Because he doesn't want to put himself in this kind of no obligation, no expectations situation, right? If anything, I think there's technically really good value on Islam Makhachev here. Volkanovski weighed in at about 180 when he got the call, so had to drop 25 pounds in about 11 days. That can't be easy on the body. We saw his picture, their first time up versus their second time up. He looked a lot better that first time up, where he had more time to prepare his body. And, you know, what I'm getting at here is sort of by default, I don't think we see the 100% version of Alexander Volkanovski here. The 100% version was back in February, where he was fighting in his home country, where he had the hype. He was the guy coming up. You know, the people thought he won, even though he didn't. And that wasn't enough to get the job done here. So I don't see how this version is enough in an environment that's going to favor Islam Makhachev this time around. So again, Makhachev is almost my pick by default here. Yes, he was outstruck a little bit in that first fight, but he landed 4 takedowns. You know, I feel like he can sharpen the striking and the striking decisions a little bit here, whereas I feel like Volkanovski may not be as sharp with the short notice that he's on. So I imagine less of a discrepancy shown with the striking, even though the gap wasn't that wide to begin with. And I imagine Makhachev being able to still land takedowns in this one. So I imagine it to be just a clearer unanimous decision for Islam Makhachev and retaining his title.
Yeah, man. Watching that last fight, man, Volkanovski, when I was watching, I thought Islam won, but I watched it again. I actually leaned towards Volkanovski and watching it again. I think there's argument that fight could have literally went either way. It depends what you appreciate more, the damage, the control. Even that round, Islam had his back. Volkanovski was the one landing bombs. And it's a tough fight because Volkanovski in rematches, like just like the Holloway fight shows that he comes back different. He's not the same guy. The last fight against Holloway, it wasn't even close. So you got to think that he could come into this fight completely looking like a completely different fight. And Volkanovski is a super live underdog in this fight. On the feet, Volkanovski is a problem that if Islam thinks he can play around with that striking with Volkanovski, he can easily get caught, easily get hurt. But in the first fight, Islam showed that he improved his striking. He's the one that was landing some good shots as well in the striking exchanges. He won portions of the rounds with his striking, where he was the one outstriking Volkanovski. So this fight literally can go either way. And when you base it off the first fight, it literally could have went either way. And the differences in this fight, you got to look at they're fighting in Abu Dhabi, and there they have 40 hours to rehydrate. In Australia, they only have 30 hours. So that benefits Volkanovski, because Islam is coming down from a much higher weight, and he's not given that much rehydration time. In Abu Dhabi, he's going to have 40 hours, so he's going to be a bigger guy than he was in the last fight. He's fighting in front of his fans. Like, these are a lot of things are different. Last time they fought in Australia, this fight, there's 11-day notice for Volkanovski as far as when he got notice of this fight, so he has to get into fight shape. Again, based on skills, I think it's close, can go either way. But when you factor in all those other intangibles, I gotta lean with Islam getting the job done. But I do think this is a fight that you can't feel confident with. This is a fight you don't want to bet. This is the mecca of MMA. You want to sit back, enjoy this fight. You just want to watch this fight because this fight literally can go either way. But I'm going to lean on the Islam side, having the full training camp, 40 hours rehydration. He's going to be the bigger guy. So I'm going to go Islam here to get the win.
All right, let's take it to Vegas. Let's consider what underdog we want to look at. Let's consider what parlay picks we want to look at as well. In usual fashion, I'll start off by reading off the underdogs. Bruno Silva is an underdog versus Sharabutdin. Jinh Frey is an underdog versus Victoria Dudakova. Mohammad Naimov is an underdog. Mike Breeden, Abu Azaitar, Victor Henry, Muhammad Yahya, Tim Elliott, Muin Gafurov, Warlley Alves, Johnny Walker, Kamaru Usman, or Alexander Volkanovski.
All right, so in the underdog pick, I'm going to have to roll with Muhammad Yahya. Again, I think this is a favorite type of card. I can see maybe 2 underdogs winning throughout the whole event, maybe 3. But I'm going to go with Muhammad Yahya here to get the win here.
All right, I'm going to echo the same sentiments there. Just overall with this card, we've seen a few of the UFC location-specific events really favor kind of those home fighters, or really favor those big favorites. I think it's going to be a very similar situation here with very few underdog spots to spare. But my underdog spot will also be for Muhammad Yahya. And in terms of parlay picks or putting together a parlay, what picks are you looking at?
I'm going with Javid Basharat, Mohammad Mokaev, Saeed Nurmagomedov, and Magomed Ankalaev.
Saeed Nurmagomedov and Magomed Ankalaev. So we have Javid Basharat, Mohammad Mokaev, Saeed Nurmagomedov, and Magomed Ankalaev. That's 4 fights. That's going to pay out a 2.71, meaning that $100 will get you a total return of $271. For our bigger bettors, $250 will return a total of $678. In terms of my picks, I think we have 2 similar picks. I'm also looking at Javid Basharat. I'm also looking at Saeed Nurmagomedov. But my third pick is going to be at the beginning of the card. Sharabutdin Magomedov. I think he gets it done as well. Those 3 fights would be a 2.21. That means that $100 will get you a total return of $221. For our bigger bettors, $250 will get you a total return of 554. So let's sign off on that note. This has been UFC 294, Islam Makhachev versus Alexander Volkanovski 2, the rematch, presented by yours truly here at Boxing MMA Picks. Please make sure you hit the thumbs up on this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel here at Boxing MMA Picks as well. And we want to hear from you in the comments, most importantly. Let us know if you agree with our picks, our underdog pick, our favorite picks, our parlay picks. If there's a specific prop that you're looking at that you want additional insights on, if you want to sort of state your own picks, your own parlays that you're looking at and want additional commentary there, let that all be known in the comments. We're more than happy to have that dialogue with you. But officially signing off, he goes by Zan, I go by Harris. This has been UFC 294, Islam Makhachev versus Alexander Volkanovski 2, full card prediction presented by yours truly here at Boxing MMA Picks. And in our usual fashion, let's get this money.
Let's get it.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have that up in like 20 minutes.
All right, scene. Easy.
All right, later, yo.